Good to be with you, Mike. My name is Professor Andy McIntosh. I've been a professor of thermodynamics since the year 2000, retired in 2010, part-time in the last few years at the University of Leeds. So I've been teaching aviation students aerodynamics. I've been an expert in teaching heat transfer and combustion and doing research in these areas as well. So that's been my career, which I'm still involved in, but to a much less extent. I retired from full-time work in 2010 at the University of Leeds, but I'm involved in a little bit of research still. I retired because I wanted to major on this issue of origins and particularly show to people the science is not favourable to the evolutionary position, and that actually origins as described in the Bible is exactly what it says.
Okay, so do you accept the theory of evolution?
Well, you need to define your terms here, Michael. If I use the term evolution, I use the term to describe the big idea that a pea soup of chemicals 13 point whatever billion years ago became people after a long period of time. Now that I certainly don't accept. Some people, and I think it can be confusing, use the term evolution when all that they mean is adaptation. And I clearly would join most of my creation thinkers in the science world in recognising that there is clear examples of adaptation where creatures adapt to their environment. But that is, as I said, adaptation. That is not what I would call evolution. So you need to define your terms. Loosely put, sometimes people distinguish it by the following definitions. Molecules to man, evolution, I reject. But the idea that there can be adaptation, which I won't use the term in this interview myself, but sometimes people will use the term microevolution, and that's very confusing because it just suggests that there is a degree between the two, and there isn't. It's actually a very different phenomenon. I would just use the term adaptation. So any idea that you can create information which wasn't there before, I don't accept.
What about fossil evidence? There have been a number of discoveries that seem to prove that evolution is a fact. For example, the fossil Tiktaalik, it had a crocodile-like head, a trunk similar to a salamander, as well as a fish's rear end and tail. Richard Dawkins describes this fossil as the perfect missing link between fish and amphibians. Don't fossils such as these prove that we were once fish who emerged from the sea?
So, well, I think if you look at the fossil records, there's a lot of supposed missing links that have been come up throughout history. So if you're looking over the last 100 years even, the amount of missing links that have been proposed and then found out to be false is quite numerous. So there was one of the 8 Man, which was about 20 years ago. So this is, I would say, this is the latest edition of the so-called transitional fossil. So I think if you look at them particularly, what's happened in the past as these so-called transitional species have just been proven to be different parts of different animals. So the ape man was an ape skull with the human body, for example. So I don't really know much about the science behind the fossils. It's not my kind of area I've looked into much, but I do know that usually these things, it's quite hard to put your faith and trust in them as actually being part of one animal. So when fossils are found, they're not all found in one piece. Often they're found in different places. Sometimes they're part of one animal, but it's very hard to see as being one. We can't guarantee it as one specific creature, but I'm not aware of that specific one you've talked about. But from what I've seen in the past, usually with fossils and bones especially, that's often what happens. I wouldn't say I don't know much about that one. So I'll have to look into that.
So we need to ask the question, Michael, how do things get fossilised? Now, here I've got an example from Whitby, and your camera may be able to pick it up, which shows a series of a large number of fossilised ammonites. In fact, you could go back there today and probably still find them. They're not actually in Whitby, it's close to Whitby, it's down that coast. And you'll find that this is actually Port Mulgrave. You'll find that the cliff is constantly falling into the sea, and the sea gradually erodes the cliff. And buried in that cliff are literally thousands, littered all the way through the cliff. And you can see them on the ground as well, ammonites. Now, how did these ammonites get fossilised? Do you think, I'm not saying you personally, but do we think that the ammonites just sort of lay there while they gradually got buried? Everything suggests that they were buried catastrophically. Everything is saying this, but these creatures weren't buried slowly. They were buried catastrophically. I've got some other ammonites here, much better examples. This particular ammonite is again from Kettleness near Whitby, a lovely example of a twin pair of ammonites, very, very clearly preserved in the rock. Now, I'm going to come to your question, therefore, by asking, first of all, how do you get fossils? And in particular, how do you get those fossils which appear to be amphibians which were changing? I'm pretty sure that they were amphibians, the ones that you're referring to, but we need to ask the question how they got buried. Now, I don't have examples of those particular fossils that you referred to, but I'm aware of them and I know that they exist, and we are aware of these creatures that Richard Dawkins refers to in his book. This is a fossilised fern. This is a large, fairly large, just part of a large fossilised trilobite. Now, these are Triassic fossils. They're not in the same layers as the ones that you're referring to, which are in the Devonian period. But again, they indicate rapid burial, particularly this fern. There's no way you could get that fern to be fossilised slowly, because when a fern dies, it just curls up and withers. So there's no way you can get these fossils slowly. This is another trilobite from North Africa, almost certainly, this is from Morocco, and you can clearly see the eyes, which are amazing on a trilobite, which shows that these were fossilised quickly. Now, the closest I've got to what you've been referring to in your question is this fossilised fish from the Green River Formation. Now, you can even see the fin marks on this fish. You have to be careful, of course, that you don't get some sort of forgery, but putting that to one side, these are so relatively common that we know that they do exist. This is not a forgery, this is a real fossil from the Green River Formation. You sometimes have examples of one fish eating another fish in the process of eating another fish. There's one of an ichthyosaur, not a fish, which is a seagoing mammal, which is in the process of giving birth to a baby ichthyosaur. Now, in the light of that, even though I don't have a fossil of the two creatures that you referred to, I have no doubt that these creatures were buried fast. They weren't buried slowly. Therefore, the way that you interpret the evidence is very important here.
I know that there is fossil evidence. People use fossil evidence both ways. Some people say it disproves, but it just the fossils themselves, and also the geographical layers that they've been found in, and also I think anatomy and biological, like the way we look compared to other animals, and the parts inside of us that are similar to other, fit with the theory that we've developed over time.
Richard Dawkins and his friends are trying to suggest that there is a slow change from fish to amphibians by suggesting that tetrapods, that is, creatures with 4 limbs which could possibly be used on land, were emerging. Whereas in fact it's quite plausible. In fact, the evidence, more than plausible, fits far better with the interpretation, which simply says that there were amphibians existing in the past that we don't have today, and that those amphibians, along with all the other creatures that I've referred to, got buried catastrophically